My real estate friends are going to kill me when they hear this, but yes, I just talked my friend out of buying new construction here in Jacksonville because the builders are getting desperate and they're using financial incentives to get you in that house. And I can show you why that might actually backfire for you right now. And it may make more sense to rent. It depends on how you negotiate. And of course, you need a top real estate agent to make it happen. So let's dig into the data of what I am talking about. So here's what is happening on the ground. Okay, there's been a massive boom in real estate, and builders in the Sunbelt have completely overbuilt, where there's now just a massive amount of supply that they are trying to slosh on the next wave of home buyer by buying down their interest rate to what it basically was in 2022. Sometimes they'll get them down to 3.99%. So this is the share of new home sales using permanent buy downs. This shows that 64% of homes sold by the largest home buyers provide a permanent mortgage rate buy down. That means for the whole 30 years if they're doing a 30-year mortgage. After 3 years of heavy use, permanent buy downs have become a structural feature of the new home market. Basically, everybody is using this strategy and they're competing against the existing homes in other neighborhoods, and the existing homeowners can't sell their house because they're so close to new construction. And why would you buy an existing house when you can get a brand new one with a 3.99% rate versus a 6.3 or 6.5% rate? A new home market, if artificially propping up home prices, this is keeping these prices high in these new construction communities because the builders do not want to drop their prices on any, not even a single house, because if they do, it's going to cause appraisal issues for the rest of the community. And it is much cheaper for them to buy down the interest rate than to reduce the price of the houses. So the problem is when that price correction eventually comes, we don't know when it's going to happen, but it's starting to happen right now in certain areas around town. All of these buyers who are buying in this new construction community with these low rates are buying at these insane prices. They are going to be underwater and stuck in their house, and they're not going to have the mobility that they had because they just bought it at the wrong possible time. And they structured the deal, yes, to maybe get the payment that they want, but when they go to resell the house, they're going to find that they're in a negative equity position and they can't move. So this is what's happening with builders right now. This is from Reventure Consulting. New home prices declining since 2022. This is Lennar. You can see that during the peak is $491,000 for Lennar's house, and that same house is now selling for 383,000. Can you imagine being the one that bought it for 491,000? But what if you were incentivized today to buy it at that price, but you're going to get a 4% rate? Would you still buy it knowing that, just down the line, you could be having a huge drop of nearly $100,000 in the price of the home? Probably not. You would probably want to negotiate the price down as much as humanly possible, even more so than you would on the interest rate. And so you can see we had this massive spike run up when the government put zero interest rate policy in place. We had this tons of buying through 21, 22, and then boom, right when 2022, March 2022 hit, when we started raising interest rates, that's when we started seeing the prices come down because real estate is extremely sensitive to interest rates because they're all backed by, the majority of them are backed by debt. And so you can see it's had a 22% decline in sales price net of incentives. So this includes the incentives of the rate buy downs. And this is a huge fact that is showing up that builders are just massively desperate. Here's a piece of information that came out. They're talking about the Fed cuts these rates. Well, of course, the Fed cuts don't impact the mortgage rates directly. They're influenced for sure. But this is what it says. Rates drop. Big news. Federal Reserve cuts interest rates for the first time in 9 months. This is the best time to buy. Home prices may rise fast. This is how you know they're in on it. Absolutely. And you need to be careful listening to websites like Housing Wire and stuff like that. Again, their advertisers are all builders and lenders, and they want to sell as much product to you, the consumer, as possible. So just make sure you understand the frame of the data that you're getting it through. Don't wait. Contact us today. Learn more about this great rates Lennar Mortgage LLC is offering, right? So they're advertising a payment, not a price. And this is really important distinction. Whenever anybody's advertising a payment, not a price, you need to negotiate down the price. So existing owners are doing okay. So this chart is really interesting. It says monthly mortgage payment to buy today versus existing mortgages, right? So these are the existing owner mortgage costs, and these are the new costs of what it would cost to buy a house. So basically what the builders are doing is they're saying, this is what it would cost you to buy this X price house today. And if you wanted to buy it from us, you have to pay this crazy high price, but we'll buy down your rate so you're paying this type of mortgage payment today so we can make that happen. And that's ultimately what's happening. They're trying to make it more affordable, but it's a trick. It's not actual affordability. It's just a rate buy down, in which case you're still paying a very high price. You're just paying a lower payment over a period of time. And it's again, it's you need both. You need to get that price down as long as possible. And what this does is keeps you locked into the house and makes it very hard for you to move when you have that low rate. And people do move. I'll tell you, here in Jacksonville, it's very transient. People come in for 2 to 3 years and then they leave. And if you're buying that house, you're going to have to turn around and try to rent it. By the way, rents are down about 15 to 20% from the peak prices as well. And there's tons of inventory that you're competing against. So you're going to have vacancy. So if you're not prepared to rent this thing, and you haven't done the rental comp analysis when you buy that house, you could be set up for serious disaster down the line. Now, of course, we're in this affordability crisis, and this is one of my favorite charts. This comes from Darth Powell. If you don't follow him on X, you absolutely should. But it's the mortgage payment percentage of income. So, what percentage of your income goes to pay for your mortgage? And honestly, I can't even imagine someone going through today using 40% of their income to pay their mortgage and their rent. And I'm sorry, I feel for you guys. This is really tough spot to be in because there's no money left over for you to consume after taxes and just other living expenses outside of your payment. But this is what determines your sales volume. So you can see that when the housing affordability becomes such a percentage of your income, either through interest rate or price, you can see that it just completely drops the number of sales that are happening. And that's exactly what's happening today. And this is why the builders are freaking out and giving these rate incentives. And guess what? It's not even working. Buyers intuitively know that this is a crazy deal. And the only reason why they're buying down the rate so much is because the house is overpriced. So new homes are stacking up despite the incentives. This is new homes for sale in the US South region by thousands. I mean, we are way past the 2008 numbers and we haven't even hit a correction yet. So just buckle up and hold on because something will happen in the market over the next 2 to 3 years that will tip it over. And my projection is because there's so much inventory coming on the market and people do want to move, we are going to see prices come down. It's already come down about 10% where I'm located in Florida. In Florida and Texas, I'm expecting another 10 to 20% over the next 3 to 4 years as we figure this out. And I'll be talking later in this video about the demographic situation that can completely blow this out of the water and make it a very big deal for prices. So hang on tight and be ready for those charts. So this comes from John Kaminsky. It's an analysis that shows where is the distress that's already showing up in the market. Even though these properties were just sold in the last few years and they're brand new, where is the distress happening? Well, the reality is it's happening in new construction. And Lennar is the number one that has the most distressed sales in new construction. And this is according to their FHA mortgages, because when you go into a new construction community, you only put 3.5% down as your down payment, and then the prices drop 10%. You are underwater. And when you go to sell, you need to pay 6 or 7% to sell your house. You're underwater a lot more. So a lot of people, if they have to move and they just bought into new construction in the last 3 years, they're underwater in their house. This is where we're seeing the distress in FHA, in VA, in conventional 3 to 5% down with low, like tons of leverage. And they bought down the rate, but they no longer need to or can live in that house, and it's causing distress that's happening around the state of Florida. So this is a great chart. So again, you can subscribe to John Kaminsky's Substack, and he sends out all this data so that where are the new underwaters? This is what he's saying. There's new properties that come up every single month. He does an analysis saying where's the distress? The distress is in the areas where there's tons of new construction and they overbuilt and people were buying in with low down payments. They're still trying to push these products today, as you saw from the previous marketing. So you need to be extremely careful if you're a buyer buying in today's market. And I wish I had the example on here. I'll show it next time. But there's a company at the beach that did new construction and they already dropped the house from like 1.3 to 600,000. Well, there's 3 or 4 other suckers that bought it at that insane price that now their house is worth half of what it was. And this was in an area that was supposed to be, insulated because there's not a lot of new construction. Well, turns out that not every area is, completely protected from just buying at the wrong price. What you buy it for and when you buy it is extremely important. And this is the ultimate lie about real estate. It's that it only goes up. This is true with the stock market too. Stock market doesn't only go up. There's completely lost decades, as you can see from this chart. There's periods of time where there's massive booms, and there's periods of time where there's massive busts. This is U.S. real home prices history from 1890 to 2025. And as you can see, we are in a bubble already here in 2025. The other bubble was 2006, and that was triggered by the rating agencies downgrading the CLOs, and that basically just drove pushed everything over the edge, and showed this awareness of the weakness in the housing market. And here we don't know what's going to cause today for this to have some sort of triggering effect. I think it's going to be some sort of debt crisis that could happen over the next couple of years because we're compounding at such an insane rate and Congress isn't taking it seriously. If we see rates kind of spike, 1% from here, that would absolutely freeze the housing market at this point. So look, the real estate market doesn't always go up. That's what the industry wants you to think. Just look at this chart and remind yourself that that is not the case. Of course, when you plan on owning real estate for 30 years, that's great, but most people do not own their primary residence for 30 years. They usually jump every 10 to 12 years. And this affordability issue is what's causing record low home buyer demand to start for the year. So you can see on existing home sales, we're also just grinding along the bottom. Part of the reason why the existing home sales are so low is because the new home sales they have to compete against those rate buy downs, and the average buyer, they don't have the economies of scale to buy down somebody else's interest rate that a builder would have. So you can see we're already basically at the low level of 2009, and this is a huge problem. Our population is 20% larger since that time period, and here in Florida. So for us to have lower existing home sales is a problem. Actually, here in Florida, we're about 15% lower than we were in our 2019 levels number of sales. So we are already pre the zero interest rate policy period in terms of number of sales. And it could get worse next year. It depends on what the Fed's going to do. There's a lot of concern about what's going to go on in the stock market. I think if the stock market cracks, that could really start to impact the housing demand and shake people's confidence to make the largest purchase of their life. So look at this. This is from Zillow. This shows as of October 2025, 53% of homes have lost value over the past year as measured by their Zestimate. So you can see that this trend was reversing, pretty quickly. And we think that prices will continue to fall. So this is share of Zestimates down over 1 year. And this will continue to get worse. So people are starting to wake up to the fact that prices are changing direction. Just 4 or 5 months ago, people were saying, no, it's not possible. It'll never change direction. Prices only go up. And we started saying, no, like there's certain areas with new construction, especially here in the Sunbelt, where that's not going to be the case. Of course, in the Northeast, it's very different, and every single market is extremely unique. But again, this conversation is about if you're near the builder, you're near new construction, and if you need help selling your house, reach out because we have strategies to be able to help you compete against the builders. It is rough out there, and you do need a professional at the highest level to be able to get out of it. And I want to talk about something that's like really important because when you're thinking about buying a new house at the peak of the market and staying there for a very long term, 30 years, let's say, there's tons of factors that are going to play into housing for the next few decades. This is Berkshire Hathaway Home Services says that they expect a surge in unoccupied homes left behind by the baby boomers. There's estimates that 13 to 14 million baby boomers will sadly pass in the next decade or so, and they will have these houses that they'll just be unloading to the next generation that need a lot of work done on them. And I mean, that alone, on top of the foreclosure backlog that we're seeing starting to come onto the market, could really drive inventory up, right? So I'm telling my friend all this information. Hey, are you sure you want to buy new construction at the price that they're telling you right now? By the way, I told him not to, he didn't. And then 2 weeks later, they already dropped that unit that he was interested in by $25,000. And the rep said there's no way they would ever drop the price lower. Of course, they'll drop the price lower. Look at the level of inventory that they have. But think about the baby boomers for the long-term demographics. But I also want you to think about AI. And when cars start driving themselves, you don't need to live near your work anymore because you're going to be able to work in your car or while you're being transported from one spot to another. That's going to come in the next decade. We're going to have robots in our house doing the majority of work for us. We could be only working 3 days a week. There's a lot of things that could really impact the housing market moving forward that I think is really important to think about if you're going to be a buyer for the next 30 years. So the reality is that the majority of the homeowner equity, majority of assets are owned currently by the baby boomers, 61 years and older. And that's a massive thing that's going to, again, we talked about them sadly passing away, and this wealth will, some of it will transfer, a lot of it will get stuck into the nursing homes and healthcare, etc., before it gets to the next generation. But their houses will sell. So the majority of people who get the house in an estate, 70% of those go to sell their house within the next year. We know that, and it's backed by the data. So this is going to, again, have a massive influx of houses that come onto the market in the future. So I like this chart. It shows that metros with the greatest share of homes that have lost value in the last year. And you can see that, look, Jacksonville is one of the top ones, Dallas, Austin, Tampa, Orlando, San Antonio, these Phoenix, these are the areas where you had massive price appreciation during the zero interest rate policy. You just had tons of inventory added to these market. You had investors speculating these markets, driving up the prices, causing rents to go higher. Again, where it became so unaffordable, where people, why would you relocate there? It's better to probably stay where you are than to relocate to an area like this if there's no affordability advantage anymore. So, but homes aren't selling for a loss just yet. This comes from Zillow. Just 4% of homes have lost value since their last sale. That may seem like a small amount, but it's not, and it can change directions very quickly. Quickly in real estate terms means like a year or two, by the way, but we are seeing the changes happening. We expect these numbers to move up in the future. And because the builders are buying down these interest rates, people are staying in their homes longer. You can see this in 2022, 2023, 2024. Look, if you bought a house in 2020, 2021, you're going to have this super low interest rate. It's going to be really hard for you to sell and buy a new one at a much higher interest rate because it'll impact your payment, especially because prices haven't come down yet. And we used to see people only stay in previous decades in their house for 6 years, and now it's averaging 9.25 years. So this, of course, depends on the area. We're at a naval base where people rotate in and out every single 2 years and they use their VA loan. But for a lot of those people, again, they're getting locked in because they put zero down, the prices are lower, and now they have to rent out the house or they just have to stay in it and not move, and it's causing this lock-in effect. So I do think that we're going to see people stay in their house a little bit longer because of this, which not having the mobility is not good for our country. And look, the affordability crisis is plaguing our administration. This comes from Goldman Sachs. And so we obviously see the administration come out with just throwing spaghetti at the wall, trying to figure out what's going to work. Can we do a 50-year mortgage? Can we do portable mortgage? Can we assume mortgages? They're coming up with anything because they have to decide whether or not they're going to let the baby boomers continue to retire out and sell their assets at the highest prices ever, or they're going to let the next generation come in and actually purchase houses which are completely unaffordable. So they have to decide, who am I going to represent on this major asset class, and what am I going to do? Well, the administration's very clearly, they're trying to extend this bull run in favor of the people who already own their assets and intervene to not let the prices come down. And this is why it could take a little bit longer for the market to actually reset back to reality. Of course, the Fed already holds $2.3 trillion of mortgage-backed securities, so they're manipulating and have manipulated the interest rate down a ton. I mean, if they sold the $2.3 trillion worth of mortgage-backed securities, we could see rates above 10%, and that would create a huge opportunity for prices to come down, the next generation to come in. So they're all working together, the Fed and the federal government, to make sure that prices don't come down. They will do whatever they can, I think, in the future, but I believe there will be a point in time where the consumer is so loaded up with debt, they have so much stress that they're not going to be able to buy anymore, and prices will just have to come down, on top of the baby boomer situation, on top of the AI, on top of the cars and the robots and things like that. That's starting to change our world very quickly. And right now, when we look at it, same basic 20 people who are buying 20 years ago are buying today. This is what I love about this chart. So my favorite thing about this chart is that the median home buyer age rose from 39 in 2005 to 59 in 2025, 20 years over 20 years. It's the same people buying the homes 2 decades later, right? So your timing of when you purchase is incredibly important, when you buy, when you sell, and if you can continue that process. So think about the demographics when you're purchasing your house, and have a hypothesis of what you think is going to be happening into the future. So I'd love to hear from you. When you're driving around your area, do you see new construction struggling in your area? If you don't even have new construction, are you seeing existing homeowners struggle? What incentives do you see? Okay, so I'm currently seeing 8% bonuses to realtors to bring a buyer. That's insane, right? They'd rather, instead of reduce the price, they'd rather give a realtor 8% on the buy side of a transaction than reduce the price. That's how important price is to the builders. And they're willing to pay tens of thousands of dollars to buy down your interest rate on your house. So what incentives do you see? Again, they and let us know. I have a couple builders who are fire sailing and they're just getting out of their entire portfolio. And, basically some of them haven't necessarily lost money, but they're definitely not making money. And I'd love to hear from you. What do you think comes next? Do you believe that real estate will continue to move up 4% every single year, like the media continues to say, or do you think we're going to have some sort of downshift economy like I see? Love to hear from you in the comments as always. Good to hear from you. And I have a live Q&A on Friday around 1 o'clock. I'd love for you to tune in there. You can come in and ask whatever questions you want. If you want more real estate content, you can subscribe to my Substack, information below. I talk about things on there that I can't talk about here on YouTube. So thanks so much for watching. We'll see you soon.